Hello and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kendra Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Today I'm going to be answering a response from a recent video I did, and here's some additional information or some more questions that are follow-ups. So we have an anonymous female left behind and forward moving spouse with a bomb drop of April 20th, 2023, a date of marriage of 2011, and I believe I said clinging boomerang was the contact type, and a high energy replayer. She says, "You're right. I do have trauma. My dad cheated on my mom. I'm the one who caught him in it. It was a long emotional affair with secret calls and meetings. This was when I was in my 20s, and I was the one who was trying to save my parents' marriage. He ended up marrying the alienator." Okay, so that's the background for the trauma. Then she says, later on, now we're on to her situations. She had, her MLCer has been on vacation with the alienator, and she says, the thing is, he did get on a plane the morning after I asked him to. He said to come back here. He's still overseas, but he's with his parents and siblings. I saw him on a camera with them. Must have been one of those ring things, I'm guessing. Okay. He said to come home in a few weeks, and he's expressing great regret, shame, and remorse. Now, I'm going to stop for a moment, and let's go back and remind you of bomb drop. April 20th, 2023. It is now March 2024, so we are not quite at a year. We're at just over 10 months, okay? My question is, when Chuck came back all those 8 times, did he really seem like he meant it each time? And yet he ran away, escaped again, because it was too soon? If he was not with the alienator when he came back, did you welcome him back with affection? I want to try again with him, but I don't want my heart to get crushed in the process. It helped to hear you say today that he will run away again, and I should expect it. Thank you. I wonder, can they run away without an alienator? So first, let's go back to Chuck came back all those 8 times. Did he seem like he really meant it? No, not always. There were a couple of them in there where one I can think of specifically, but probably a few others but where the whole purpose was, I'm going to see what I can get away with. Now, most of them were not that way. So when I say 8 times, there was one where he came home and he was home for a week. That was the testing one, where he just tried to test and poke and see what he could get away with. And so when he left, when we went on a little vacation at the end of that week, it was awful. And I told him he was not welcome. He had to leave when he got back. I did not kick him out in the way I've described kicking him out after he'd been home for a year. On that occasion, I packed his bags, put them in his car, and escorted him out the house when he got home from work, because he took the motorcycle to work that day. On this occasion, I said, when we get home, you need to leave. And so he initiated packing his bags. He did it. He wasn't escorted out of the house and thrown out with his bags thrown after him or that sort of thing. But I still said he needed to leave, and he did. But on that occasion, I don't even know if she was in on it, where it was like, yeah, you should go there and prove to you should be there. Wouldn't surprise me. Most of the times, I think he thought he was coming home. I think he really intended to, and he didn't know. Some of the times in the beginning, it was, well, I can come home with my wife, and she's my friend. She could be my friend. I mean, I knew that wasn't going to work out, but he didn't know that wasn't going to work out, and so he's going to tell me, I'm not friends with her. I won't be friends with her. I'll do what you say. But I'll call her occasionally. I'll stop by where she works. I can see her. It's okay. I can handle it. Same thing as, I'm an alcoholic, but I can handle just one little drink. No, you can't. So it's not about meaning it. It's about not being through your crisis yet. And so you still have the issues, and you think you're cycling, and you're feeling regret. You're feeling shame. You're feeling guilt. You're seeing the pain. You're seeing your own pain, and my spouse is doing great. I'm going to go there. I don't really want to leave my spouse, and they're strong, and I miss her. And this other person was emotionally blackmailing him. She faked a pregnancy the first time he broke up with her. Soon after that, she told him on one of the occasions that she was going to not fix her brain. It wasn't real. I mean, it was just absurd. She had real problems. I mean, medical. I don't even mean the mental stuff. She had a hysterectomy about almost exactly a year after bomb drop. She had an actual hysterectomy. I know it was real. I don't have any evidence. I just don't doubt it. She had an incident where before the hysterectomy, she was calling him and saying, "I'm in pain. I need you to come and get me." I have no idea why, but I believe that. I believe it now, and I believed it then. What I didn't agree to is like, yeah, you should call your boyfriend who's sitting at home, who lives with his wife. He was on one of his, periods of being at home, who lives with his wife. You should call him and tell him to come and get you. We had just gone out to dinner. We were sitting there together with all the texts coming in from her. And I said, yeah, sure, you can go. You just have to bring me, okay? And I knew what that was going to be. And I just laughed at the, fuck no. And he was showing him to me. So he was taunting her. And I said, yeah, I knew he was going to go, though. It took time, but I knew he was going to go. I said, the door's going to be locked. I am not mad at you. And I know that this is a pull. I knew it. But the door's going to be locked behind you today. I didn't say you can't come home again. Later on, I would have done that full. I wasn't a year in at that point. But he couldn't come home that night. And he said he did take her to the hospital. I mean, she could have called an ambulance or her dad, who just lived around, I think, 3 houses away. So, but he meant it, and she kept emotionally blackmailing. She pulls him back in, trying to make him feel guilty. He meant it, and he wasn't strong enough. He was not through his crisis. He had not resolved the issues, the Swiss cheese gaps within his own development. So you keep falling into those gaps. And so you think you're fine, and then you fall into another gap. Take a few steps, fall down. Take a few steps, fall down. And so, yeah, he was still an escape and avoid. If he was not with his alienator when he came back, did you welcome him with affection? Well, he was always with her, and he came back saying he was leaving her. And in my situation, he lived with her and moved home directly from her place. So it wasn't a situation of he had been living in his own apartment and was coming home, or he had been living in his own apartment and was saying, we're going to try again, but you're not coming home yet. There was a clear mark of her house, my house. And so if you're coming to my house, that means you're leaving her. You're ending your relationship. It doesn't mean it would take, but it meant that was the intention of it. And so that was, unless he's lying, and like the one time where I know he did, there's probably 1 or 2 more in there that are similar. But the intention, even on his part, I watched him cycle. I watched him get scared a day later sometimes and tell me how he was scared. Tell me how, I can't believe it. I can't. I thought of leaving 50 times in the last 50 minutes. But at least he told me. He didn't tell me in a mean way. He told me as I am confiding in you. And he was telling me how this made him afraid. This was not a taunt. So then you say you want to try again, but you don't want your heart to get crushed in the process. That's detachment. Part of detachment is getting yourself emotionally regulated. And the other part is understanding the process of midlife crisis, the psychology of an affair, and what she might be doing, the alienator might be doing toward him, how she might be pulling him, and creating guilt and toxic shame in him. He should have guilt. He should have shame. Those are things that we have because we have a conscience. But toxic guilt, toxic shame, those are things where the other person tells you how guilty and horrible you are for what you've done to them. And how you're doing these things, and you're a terrible person. You should feel so bad. That's toxic. It's not your own internal guilt and shame. That's toxic, and they might do that. It's part of emotional blackmail. So you don't get crushed because you're detached and you accept the process of midlife crisis. You know what it is. You know how hard it is. Oh, you still hold their feet to the fire and say, this is unacceptable. But oftentimes, things that are unacceptable, you know they're going to happen. I mean, I tell my kids to, give me your homework packet when you get home. Do they? I got one kid that regularly gives it to me, and I didn't see it last week. I get one kid that just denies he has one. Oh no, well, your teacher says to do? I can say, I expect you to do that, but there's so many ways of expecting. That's setting an expectation. It's not really thinking they'll do it. Yes, he will likely run away again. She will pull him away again. And if she allows him to go and not stretch out, and she's more mature and just had this fling with him now and realizes it was a mistake or whatever, he's not through his crisis. Just because the alienator is gone doesn't mean there won't be another one. Okay? And alienators last. What I mean by that is they find an affair that is going to pull them through, that is going to be there for the arc of the crisis. And there's going to be emotional blackmail. That is a book by Susan Forward, so I would recommend that book so that you know what emotional blackmail is, what it entails, and what they are going through so you can have empathy for it. That does not mean you allow them to use that as an excuse to not be accountable. But it does mean you can use it to fuel your empathy for what they're going through. Can they run away without an alienator? Sure, of course they do. We have plenty that don't have an alienator. Some of them run away with the intention of finding one. Some of them run away with one waiting in the wings, so there really is one. Some of them run away with not having the intention, but it happens. Or some run away with, I'm open to it, but it's not my purpose. Can one who's had an alienator run away without an alienator? Sure, of course they can. And it doesn't mean there won't be an alienator. And they can say they're running away and there's not one, and there is. It doesn't mean she's gone. If it's a limerent affair, there is an addiction. And what you've described is one there, whereas there's reciprocity. So it could be limerence on both of them. Maybe one, it's like, we were just having fun, and the other's limerent. But it's not an emotional affair from a distance where you are either being catfished in by somebody who's manipulating you, knowing how you feel, but they never have any intention. Or I have a crush on the coffee guy, and you see them every day, but they have no idea. Or, a family friend, they have no idea. They're your emotional affair. They're more your limerent object, but it's not. There's no reciprocity. Or you could have an emotional affair where both of you know, you try not to say it, but the friendship is crossing the lines into being too vulnerable together because you're not being vulnerable with your spouse. You're sharing with this person rather than your spouse. So there's a lot of different levels of an affair in that. And it could be any of those. But right now he's got the one that seems like a limerent object type of affair. And with reciprocity, which makes it an emotionally bonded affair. We'll see how that takes, though. Okay, she's somebody from his past, but she's much older. So, maybe a Mrs. Robinson thing going on here. I don't know. Your job is to heal. Your job is to get the trauma therapy that you need so that you can be emotionally regulated, so you can be stable for your children. They're little. So that you can be stable for co-parenting. And then he's going to see you through that lens. And as a co-parent, he's going to have communication with you. And you're going to be an attractive force to him. But be careful. That doesn't mean, okay, yeah, attractive force, let's get together. He's not ready for it. And so you are welcoming. You are empathetic. You show your compassion. And you are patient and peaceful. You know what? I want that too. But I just don't think we are ready for that yet. That is my goal. Us to be together. But I need to be with you. Can't you just, I'm throwing you a bone. You got to give me something. It's not enough. Say, okay, let's go to therapy. First thing, there's a litmus test in therapy. Okay, I'll go. But they're not ready. They're not going to do the work. And he drops out of it. You keep going. Or he does go, but he doesn't do anything. You keep going. Keep going. Go on your own. Say, you know what, this isn't working for us, and it doesn't mean it's over. I'm not going to let you hurt our marriage, because he's so worried about that. I'm going to put our marriage in a box. I want you to figure out you, and I'm going to give you the gift of that space. That gift does not mean that I am allowing you to have an affair. I can't control you. An affair is not an acceptable part of our marriage or of our relationship. And so you need to know, if you choose to go out and have that affair or continue your affair, it is not with my permission. It is not with my, I am not saying it is acceptable. I'm saying it's wrong. It is the wrong choice. But I know that you may make that choice. I'm saying I can't control you. Okay? I'm not going to stop loving you. I'm not going to stop believing in what you can be. Okay? And I want you to believe in that person. You have somebody here who does believe in that person. Okay? We're going to get through this, but first, our marriage isn't going to be healed until you can be healed. And so the marriage, it's in that box, and the box is going to protect it, okay? That's what I want him to know if he gets worried and scared about it. Don't talk about it until he shows that he's worried. Because then it's, why are you saying this to me? Some people, if we bring it up, I've never said anything like I ever want to be back with you. You're delusional. You only bring that up when he shows the need for reassurance and that he's worried. Okay? But get the therapy. Because I don't want your heart to be crushed. Part of it is get the therapy to help you through your own traumas, to help you withstand. And then maybe you'll choose to be a stander with that as your part of, giving you a foundation of strength. Okay? I hope this is helpful. And I will see everybody in the next question.
Hello, I am back. I just received another quick question regarding this question, and it was a couple weeks after I recorded, but before it goes out. So I'm just going to be adding to that. I do apologize if I repeat myself through this, but instead of recording a new one for later, I thought this went well together, and it was a really important question to answer. So pieces of it may already be answered. She says, he's coming back in 3 weeks. He says it's over with the limerent object, and he wants to rebuild our marriage. It's only been 6 months since bomb drop, and as I recall, that was a scorched earth kind of bomb drop was the 6 month, but there was one it was more like a year. He seems remorseful, clear on the fact that he wants me and our family, but it's only been 6 months, so I'm aware that this could be a touch and go. And she says that as a question. This could be a touch and go. Here's my question. Every time when Chuck came back, this is important, did you act like you expected it to work? That is the crux of what we want to talk about. Should I treat him as if we are truly rebuilding as he says he wants to and go all in? I want to do this. How many questions did you ask about the affair? Such as, when did it start? When did you know it was over? And secondly, did you insist he cut off all contact with her? I've asked him not to contact her. She's in another country. There's no way for them to secretly meet up. But I don't want to be policing his WhatsApp. Do I keep talking about this or just say it once and leave it? Okay, so a few things. First thing, I really want you to have some therapy guiding you in this. And I don't mean you personally. I mean the two of you together. So one of the conditions I would like you to set is therapy, because the therapist will give you the rules that you need to follow that you're asking about. And find somebody who has a few things, if you can. First, emotionally focused therapy, EFT. It is a therapy that is started by Sue Johnson. I will try and remember. I won't make a promise because I actually already uploaded all of this before, and I'm going to have to edit and re-add to it. But I'll try and remember to go add a link to a video that I just watched with an interview with Sue Johnson on her EFT and what she does. But it's a great video to watch. And she wrote the book, Hold Me Tight, I believe is the book, on her EFT. Emotionally focused therapy. It is a modality that she designed specifically with affair recovery in mind. It doesn't have anything to do with midlife crisis. And it does not mean that he is through a midlife crisis and that means this will work. But Yes, I approached it. Did you act like you expected it to work? And I like the way you said act like I expect it to work. It's the same as when your child comes home and you expect them to do something because you've set an expectation, but you know they're not going to. It's that confusing word with the English language and that word expect, because it means two different things that are similar but not quite. We really know they're going to break the rules, but we put a rule out there. I expect you to follow this. There are certain expectations you are supposed to follow, even though we know. So, yes, I acted like I expected it to work. Should I treat him as if you were truly rebuilding? If you're acting like you expect it to work, yes, you treat him that way. But that does not mean you treat him as though you trust him. Rebuilding is a process, reconnecting and rebuilding. There's a process. So part of rebuilding is rebuilding trust, not being trusting or being trustworthy. He needs to be and become trustworthy. And he will fall, he will fail, he'll stumble, and that's okay. We have to allow for these mishaps to happen, okay? Now, some of them might be big, and there would be consequences for them, but then there can also be repairs and amends and forgivenesses. And I want him to understand that. I want you to understand that. Just because you fail at something this week doesn't mean everything is over and you've ruined it. So that is part of what a therapist can help you guide you through. So the next thing is I would like you to go keyword this. Plan A and Plan B from marriage builders, not marriage helpers. Marriage helpers, if I sometimes, since it's two marriage things, I get them mixed up. Marriage helpers is Dr. Joe Bean. Marriage builders is a different group. Marriage builders, and I believe that is that Dr. Harley, and he has some books. Marriage Builders talks about Plan A and Plan B. And Plan A is when they're in the home and you're having an affair and there's the recovery. And Plan B is what you do when they aren't. And he's coming home. And I want you to be familiar with what you do in Plan A and Plan B, because oftentimes people who are doing Plan A have to then activate Plan B because now they have to kick them out, or the other, or one of them leaves. So I want you to familiarize yourself with Plan A and Plan B. And if you can find a therapist who is familiar, especially experienced grad, with EFT, but also has some familiarity with Plan A and Plan B, or is willing to look at it and find what those need. Because one of the most important things is transparency. And you ask about that next. You said, should he cut off all contact? Should you insist? Yes. You do not ask or request. You require. Part of the deal of you being in this marriage is that you do not have contact with her. Now, that does not mean she doesn't contact him. We can't stop her. Kind of like if they were in the same area, you can't stop him from bumping into her at the store without any intention. And you couldn't stop her from intentionally doing it. Chuck's mom went to the hospital with she had heart problems. The alienator worked on that wing of the hospital. Was I going to tell Chuck you can't go to the hospital and visit your mom? Absolutely not. And it was unfortunately a way for him to get to see her now. But it was a natural, organic way. He didn't build it into his affair. So, no, you don't want to be policing. Agreed that you don't want to be. But there does need to be transparency. He does need to give you all of access to his WhatsApp, his emails, those things. And then you do need to figure out a way, maybe a plan or how to monitor those somewhat. And I said, I have access. I will check the phone logs. All I did was check phone logs. And I hardly ever did it. Some people get addicted to the snooping, or they're like me and they are the exact opposite. I would avoid it because of the anxiety it caused. And usually it's not that I found nothing, but there wasn't a lot I could do with it. Oh yeah, he called her and they talked for a while, but it doesn't give you the content. And what I finally found later on was he wasn't calling her. And so even then it wasn't bringing me relief. Like I still had to do it. And I maybe in the last bit after he'd left her for the last time, I think maybe every 3 months or something, I finally got myself up to do it. And I wasn't finding anything by then. But yeah, you need to have access to all of those things. And this is why I say talk to the therapist. Instead of telling him all of these rules, go to the therapist. Have the therapist tell you how to do transparency and set up a program or a plan for both of you where so you have another person there telling him what it is he needs to do. Now you're not the police. You're not the one being the bad guy. It's this other person saying, this is what she needs. This is what she needs to become to trust you. And this is what you need to do. Part of what you need to do to become trustworthy, to worthy of her trust. But it's not you doing it. Now it's not only it's another person so they can project the negativity onto that person. It's also a person trained to know what to do. So there's some credibility that backs up that person rather than, well, how do you know? What do you know about this? You just want access to this. You're just going to make me into the bad guy. And sometimes that is not invalid. We don't know what we're doing either. And we just think this is what we need. And you don't really need that. The therapist is there to say, this is what this person might need. And for some of us, it makes us anxious. For some of us, we get addicted. Different people have different needs and different people handle snooping, let's call it, or policing when it's official and you're supposed to do it. We handle it differently. Do you keep talking about it or say it once and leave it? You don't say it once and leave it because that's rug sweeping. Do you keep talking about it? Let's start with doing it in the confines of the therapy, in that room, so that he knows that when he walks out of that room, it's not going to be always brought up. He doesn't have to think, okay, I'm going home after work today, and she's just going to start hammering me with questions again. Set safe spaces for not, this is a time where we don't talk about it, but also spaces where and he knows when he leaves that space, he doesn't have to go over that over and over again. Because that can be anxiety creating. And it's going to be fear bringing for both of you because he's going to see all of these questions and fears that you have and think, we can't get through this. This is just too much. And he's going to be afraid by your fears, which is the other reason I want a therapist there. I want a therapist there to normalize it for him, to reassure him that it seems like a lot to you, doesn't it? But you know what? What she's going through and experiencing, this is normal. And it's normal for people who do recover, for marriages who do get through it. It's normal for those who don't also and why in many cases? Because the person on your end that's going, we can't get through this. It's too much. They believe that and give up. But it is normal. You have to put in the work. And understand, and I think you know this part, with midlife crisis, he may not be willing, or let's not say willing, let's say ready. There's a difference. He might not be ready to put in the work. Willingness, he may want to be willing. But that's not the same thing. So, there was one other thing I want to do this. How many questions did you ask about the affair? I didn't really have to ask a lot of questions in my case. You say, when did it start? I know it was over, that sort of thing. Okay, so with Chuck's affair, first thing, he self-disclosed. That is not common, but I think it may be less uncommon, or more common when it is a midlife crisis thing. I hear about it. So back then I read a statistic in one of the, it was that by then, at that point, a new book that was out that said only 6% self-disclose. I think that might not be accurate, just because I feel like I see a lot more self-disclosures on here, or how they were defining self-disclosure. But he self-disclosed that there was somebody else. This was before the affair was physical, but it was very clear this was more than an emotional affair, in the sense that there's an emotional affair and they don't know that they're getting on the slippery slope. They were planning to be together. It was just, we're waiting. So it's not really an affair. If you're planning to be together, and that's the reason you're leaving me, then that's an affair. And that is an adulterous relationship, and it is inappropriate, period. So he self-disclosed before he moved out. It was about 2 to 3 weeks after bomb drop. Bomb drop being March 20th, 2005. He self-disclosed. He didn't tell me the truth about who she was. He said she was a client at the gym where he worked. He worked as his bachelor's is in exercise science and phys ed, so he was a trainer. But no, she actually was a certified nursing assistant at his full-time position where he was a recreation director at a retirement home. And so they worked together. And she soon after that got fired. And some of it we're pretty sure is because it was being clear that they were starting a relationship. So he self-disclosed, but it was not physical. So I knew about this. Then he moved out, and he did tell me, he said, you will know we are together when we, you and I, aren't together. And he didn't have to use words. He knew it meant sexual. You know, when we stop having sex, it's because I'm having sex with her. So the serial monogamy kind of thing. And he tried to deny it after it did start, but he was absolutely accurate about that. I knew when it started, and you could feel the energy of when it started first. There was a weekend where I came over to his new apartment. I stayed overnight, and this weekend was a lot of energy of her. And I think it was the same weekend where there was this, he had to go meet up with her and the person who was instigating they be together. And there was a boat, and then he got some sort of thing where he had to come and get our truck because there was a dinghy lost. And it was weird. It was just weird. But a lot of energy about her. And it was 1 or 2 weeks later when it was clear that I could tell they were together, but I didn't have any evidence. He showed up at our house. I was at my mom's, and I've talked about this. I raced home from my mom's 100 miles and ended up, he was on the porch and she was in the car waiting there on a Sunday. Innocent looking, I mean, or not really, but nothing going on. She's just waiting in the car and he's there and he was getting ready to leave. But I think it was a few days right after that. He was talking to me on the phone and he said, oh, she's coming, gotta go. And oh no, he said, she's home now, gotta go. So first thing, he's claiming she was home. The way he was secretively calling me, not letting her know she was with me. And he put his back out. The rest of the stuff, plus I know how he put that back out. And he had a chronic bad back. We both did. And so that was activities that could put a back out. So I knew. And turns out later they had their discussed anniversary that when she was sitting in the car, their first time was the night right before that. And that was the first night he'd stayed over at her place. And then they came to our house to grab something the very next morning. So I didn't have to ask. Now, when did I know it was over? That's more difficult because you don't have always that fine line. Remember, even our own relationships and marriages end irregularly, just like the stock market is jagged. So 2005 start. 2008, he was home for all of 2007. Took the fare underground. I kicked him out when I found out they were still together. Early 2008. 2008 was the year of, I can tell that this is the last time. If, there's a big if, I do the right thing and stop the house hopping, revolving door. We have to have a transition. That was the crux that my situation turned on, was him just coming and going, and not having a transition between us. Don't know what the axis of yours is or someone else's is. For my situation, that was it. And I knew if I solved that one thing, if I solved that, this was the end. And so I knew it was going to be over. Not that it wasn't, but going to be over when I solved that. When I was able to stick to my boundary of, you and I cannot live in the same house right after that. You leave for her house, then it is going to be a year. I had to figure out, was 3, 6, 9, how many months, and so I gave the year. Because I tried 3 months. I'd tried 6 months. And so I thought, let's skip over the 9. I told him it will be 1 year. I did not tell him if it was 1 year from the date he moved out of our house, or if it was 1 year from the time he left her again. Because what if he moved out of our house and was out of her house in a few weeks? Turned out it was 12 months from the time he left our house. One day after he'd left. And he left in the summer. I think it was July 31st. He left again. And we knew he was going to leave. It was very clear. And I knew it was going to be I think it was Tuesday, because that was the day I worked late. And I didn't know how I was going to solve the problem. I knew I had to solve the problem. And he knew. I said, you cannot come home for 12 months. I did not tell him whether it was from that time or from the time he left her. Left that open so that I could kind of wiggle that. And then at Thanksgiving, my grandma almost died in my arms. And I knew my mom couldn't do it without me. So I now had a way to give him a transition by me leaving our house for a valid reason. And he could stay at our house. And that's what we did. And yes, they called, he or she called once right after that. He didn't tell me for a few years, and it wasn't because he was hiding anything. I asked a few years later when someone asked a question about something, and I went to him and I asked this, and he said, oh, and he happened to tell me he called her, and it was like 5 years later. And I think the first words out of her mouth, so you divorced yet? And it was only 2 weeks. And that gave him closure, he said, for the attitude she had about it. And he's like, no. And if he was the one calling, he was calling because he always felt that I have to check on her, make sure she's okay. I hurt somebody. And if she was calling, not sure how the so you divorced yet came out. But that time, because of the words he was saying through 2008 leading up, even though he wasn't doing the actions, I felt better and better. He said things like, I'm going to be the stander now. Yes, he knew the terminology. He knew I was standing the whole time. It was never a secret. He said he wanted to help someone on his team who was going down the route of about to have an affair, tell him what a mistake they were making. And he was telling me these things. He told me how he was so confused why anyone cared in his family about what he was doing, but that he really wanted to be home. I just want to be home. You just need to throw me a bone. Give me something. And he was saying all of these things, lamenting, why can't I come home? I really want to be there. I want to start making a difference. But he was doing it while I said, you're doing this while sleeping next to her. So you're saying the right words. The actions weren't right. And I knew I needed to give us a space. We couldn't afford a second home, that sort of thing, but we needed it. We needed him to have his own space and me to have my own space. And that's where Grandma came in. And I knew that was what was going to work. Maybe it was intuitive. Maybe it was long enough. Maybe I'd seen some writings in how he was behaving and that he'd come home so many times. Because I knew that was going to work. You just knew. But I also knew it wasn't going to work before that. But the reason I knew it wasn't going to work before that was because it hadn't worked before that. It just hadn't. Okay. I hope I explained, because I've gone on 20 minutes to the addition to this. So if I haven't explained anything or I missed something, just let me know. And I will see everybody in the next question.